two good examples. In the early days in Syria, right, when the Syrian people said, "Hey, look, there's protests happening in Egypt, in Tunisia, against the government. We have our own problems with the government of Mr. Bashar al-Assad. We're going to protest." So they started protesting. Okay, now initially in the town of Daraa, the local governor was quite aggressive against the protesters. People died. It was terrible. The central government in Damascus removed the governor, said, "Look, this is not the way to handle protests," and so on. See, it could have calmed down right there, and then tens of thousands of people would not have been killed. But here's what's interesting: there were protests taking place in other small protests. The US ambassador goes to a protest meeting and speaks at the protest meeting against Mr. Assad. Now, just imagine New York City, Occupy New York, happening at the same time. Imagine if the Chinese ambassador to the UN or the Russian ambassador from Washington took the Acela train, arrived in New York City, went into Occupy Wall Street and gave a speech saying, "You guys have to bring down the government of I think it was Barack Obama at the time." I mean, imagine what would have happened then. Do you think that would have been seen as acceptable? He's coming there saying homelessness is on the rise in the United States. It's an outrage. You need to bring down this government. It's undemocratic. My God, he would have been expelled like this. There would have been an outrage at the UN. But the US ambassador went to a protest in Syria and spoke at the protest, giving his support to the protesters and inflamed them. So then the protesters thought the US government is behind us, the jets are coming, and so they intensified their protest. Okay, this is direct interference in a country. Direct interference. I mean, you don't need actually many more examples of this. This is direct interference, not a CIA guy in the shadows coming with the suitcase. This is the US ambassador, man, in public speak. Because then what everybody thinks is, if the US ambassador is there, then the F-16s can't be far behind. And they are going to bomb Damascus, weaken the government, collapse the government, we'll take over. That's what you say when an ambassador goes and joins a protest. They think, okay, so now let's keep fighting, because eventually the Yanks will come. And then tens of thousands of people died as a consequence of that provocation, and of course the US government doesn't apologize for that. But see, it's not like the US government created the problem. They are like a fire starter. They accelerated something that was going on anyway. Libya 2011, here's Gaddafi. Protest begins because again, people in eastern Libya said we're going to protest as well. Half the military in eastern Libya joined the rebellion. So it was a pretty fair fight. They were battling each other in the air, on the land, and so on. And the battle line was drawn somewhere near the town of Ajtabia. I remember this extremely well. Battle line was drawn around there. The Saudis and the Qataris said this is an opportunity to overthrow Gaddafi because they hated Gaddafi for all kinds of reasons. Gaddafi used to keep insulting them. And they're monarchs. They hate being insulted. He called the king of Saudi Arabia a dog created by the English, in public at an Arab League meeting. They hated Gaddafi. So they lied about Gaddafi and said that he was conducting a genocide. There was no genocide. Then NATO planes, France and the US, come and bomb the living daylights out of Tripoli. They, in fact, participate in the assassination of Gaddafi and create chaos. But this then sends a message saying, when the Yanks join your rebellion, the planes are coming, and that creates its own history and an ugly, terrible history at that. So you have regime change at different registers, so people in Georgia, they say, okay, let's go and protest. And then, Biden standing up there says, I'm with the people in Georgia. Then they start thinking, oh my God, the planes are coming. Let's keep going. Let's not negotiate with the government, Let's go and burn down a police station because the Yanks are coming. See, that's the very dangerous thing that happens. This Yanks are going to help us syndrome is a form of regime change because, then you create intractable opposition. The Ukrainians for at least a year and a half refused, when the war began, when Russia entered Ukraine, the Ukrainians immediately started negotiating with the Russians. They negotiated in Belarus, they negotiated in Ankara, in Turkey. They came close to an agreement. Then, in somewhere around June, July of 2022, Boris Johnson, who was then the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, goes to Kiev and he tells Zelensky, we are behind you. The whole of Europe is behind you. United States behind you. Don't negotiate. They destroyed the negotiation. That was in June, July 2022. And so Zelensky then thinks, well, NATO is behind me. I'm a hero. Zelensky, who won political office on the platform that I'm going to build peace with Russia, suddenly becomes the warmonger in chief. This is the role of the West. The West comes in and says our entire military power is behind you. Or if they don't say that, they intimate that by the ambassador going and talking, and people then believe, well, why should I negotiate? Politics is not about winning. Politics is about negotiation. That's what politics is. Now, revolutions are about winning, but nobody here is talking about revolutions. We're talking about the normal everyday politics. That's all. All wars end in negotiation, unless it's the armistice in Korea, which I don't know, they just refuse to have a end of that conflict. Neither side is allowing it. United States didn't want that war to end. It's not ended, but otherwise all wars end in negotiation. It's only this idea that if the West is coming, the cavalry is coming, to save the fort, only then do negotiations become impossible.
And on top of it, they'll march around the earth saying NATO is purely a defensive force when, like you said in Libya, this is just not the case. It's double speak at the highest levels, And I hope to God that China would come at some point and liberate us. Speaking of, I wish you'd come and help us because we're dying over here. I'm part of the proletariat. We're drowning in medical debt and et cetera, et cetera. And the thing with the, warships just went from Russia. They came down for drills or whatever they do. They came down to Cuba, and it's big news, that big press conference in the USA. Oh my God, Russian warships. Oh my God. They've been doing this since 2013. But when the United States does it, nobody bats an eye. They go through the South China Sea. They go through all these, the Strait of Hormuz or whatever. No, doesn't matter. Nobody what happened to, fairness? It's under the guise of spreading democracy that we're able to go and just do whatever the fuck we want. This is totally egregious and unacceptable. And frankly, it has to end. And it, correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like it's going to come to an end here soon. The hegemony is kind of shriveling, isn't it?
I mean, hegemony shriveling is too strong because right now the NATO plus countries are responsible for 3/4 of the world's military spending. 75% of the world military spending is spent by the United States, its NATO allies, and then countries like South Korea and Japan. That's incredible. China is responsible for just about 10% of global military spending. So NATO plus countries, 75%, China 10%, Russia about 3 or 4%. Very small in comparison. So their military might continues to be unparalleled. And it's important to recognize one thing. United States, its NATO allies, very good at blowing up things. Not so good at building them. Very good at blowing up things. Not so good at building them even in the United States. The maintenance of bridges, that bridge that collapsed because of the tug hit in what was it, Delaware. Very bad at maintenance and building things. Like, for instance, it's crazy. In between Beijing and Shanghai, there's a train. The normal train runs at 300 kilometers an hour. That's just mind blowing. The Acela doesn't even come 1/3 as fast. There is no high speed rail that connects New York City to Washington D.C. There isn't. It's actually a slow train.
Amtrak is pathetic.
Yeah, it's in comparison, and it's because there's no maintenance, not anything else. You talk to anybody who works in Western rail services, the UK. I mean, the UK doesn't have a good train that goes from Manchester to London. It was promised, it was supposed to happen, and at the last Conservative conference, Rishi Sunak cancelled the project. I mean, this is something, if you're sitting anywhere around the world, you're thinking, we want high-speed rail. We don't want a military base. What we want is, we want, good water services. We want, accurate and good internet services. That's what people want. They don't want wars. They want development. And that's what, in a sense, the large BRICS countries are selling, is they're selling a dream of better life, not a dream of danger. When US Secretary of State Antony Blinken goes anywhere, he sells a story of danger. Be wary of the Russians. Be wary of the Chinese. But most people around the world I don't understand why we should be wary of them. The Chinese are selling us cut price energy. And why should we, the Russians are selling cut price energy, and the Chinese, come off it. The Chinese are coming here and offering, they're offering
Everything.
investment for infrastructure. Exactly.
Everything. Yeah.
Why should we be afraid of them? What are you saying to us? It's incoherent. Waning hegemony or lessening hegemony? Yes, certainly people are not buying the Western story anymore. But the military might is considerable, and it's scary.
I hate it. I hate the fact that that's the last thing that they're really dependent on. We don't make anything, and all of our stock market, everything is based on speculation. But if you cross us, we'll bomb you to kingdom come.